Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Hardwick-Brown. It's going to be my pleasure to introduce Christina Perry here in a few moments, who's going to be talking about SOC automation. But first, a couple of housekeeping items. Who here has been subject to my bad jokes thus far? All right. Just one for you right now. What do you call a pile of cats? A mountain. Oh. All right, after this session, we've got lunch down on the expo floor. After the expo, it's the keynotes at 2 p.m. And then after the keynote, we'll be back in the session rooms at 4:15 for one more great session. I really encourage you guys to attend. After that, night at the museum. So I found out what this actually was, and it's dinner and drinks in a cool setting. So there's no like theme or anything like that. Just come join us. Everyone's invited, and we really want to see you guys there. There is a shuttle that will leave from the front of the Marriott, and there will be shuttles back as well. Lastly, don't forget to provide feedback in the MWise app for the sessions. And with that, I will welcome Christina.
Good morning, and I hope you guys have been having a great start to day 2 of MWise. So thank you, Michael, for the introduction. As he's mentioned, my name is Christina Perry, and today on the security operations track, my talk will be on pairing SOCs with automation. You won't be replaced by a robot yet. So who am I? I'll keep this slide also for the end for contact and all, but I am a senior threat ops developer at Huntress in their R&D team. I've been there just over a year now. I've spent the past 6 years and on in tech and security, previously at Twitter, or X, but was there when it was still known as Twitter, in their detection and response team, and Morgan Stanley in their threat hunt team. As perhaps many of you here, I, too, fell into security from my curiosity for breaking things apart and problem solving to find a solution. In particular, for today, I'm going to talk about problem solving for a SOC, or Security Operations Center, if you're not familiar, which relates to automation, detection and response, and open source software. What I'm not going to talk about today, some buzzwordy acronym or fad solution. I'm not trying to sell you guys anything. I am really passionate about open source technology. I'm not going to talk to you guys about some flashy SOAR or SIM tool or some off-the-shelf tool that will just automate away everything for your SOC. Also not going to talk about, contrary to my title name for the talk, I know we will not be replaced by robots just yet, but I will not be talking on AI. Happy to discuss after, though, or some wave of a magic wand type of solution. However, what I am going to talk about today is really simplifying approaches to automating your SOC. So really going back to fundamentals and truly having a SIM-agnostic solution. And to be able to do this, you really have to start with why. Why bother doing this in the first place? Why automate SOC tasks and workflows? And also your how. How to leverage existing tools that you have most effectively. How to provide insights for creating high-fidelity alerts. How to create automated workflows from existing and manual playbooks and processes. So really being able, the purpose of my talk is really being able to share from my own experiences some of the resources with what I have, being able to build some of the Slack apps, some of the workflows, some of the various enrichments that I've worked on thus far, and hope you guys can do the same. So really, what is the happy medium? When it comes to automation, we need to be able to look at this from both sides, both from the SOC and the engineers. For the SOC team, many analysts don't have the bandwidth to develop these solutions and want to cut down on triage time and meet their SLOs. As you can tell, things are usually on fire. It's just part of the team. And as a dev or an engineer on my side of things, we really try to optimize and find the Goldilocks solution, like you see in the Venn diagram, being able to have a solution that's both good, cheap, and fast, ideally. So what you see as a SOC analyst, you definitely see plenty of alerts, constantly checking for new notifications, updates, in any of the following forms. In the coming slides, I'm going to hone in on more alerts monitoring, some Slack chat ops capabilities, as well as some summaries and messaging and alerting that you would share cross regions. And then what you see as an engineer, you are responsible for iterating on existing solutions as well as creating new ones, whether it's Python, your cloud-based solution, or otherwise. It's really critical, and reiterating this, to know the why, like why you're building this to best support your detection and response teams. And this includes building our data pipelines out for automated solutions and tools to effectively support our SOC. And TLDR, before things catch on fire, I cannot stress having a game plan with your SOC, your dev team, and leadership. The places that I've been that have a sound and strong security program are the ones that put deliberate focus into what they're building. So walk before you run. Know your fundamentals. Know your priorities. And whether that's time, cost, urgency, the closest to 100% security, or all of the above, these are all important things to take into account. And of course, engaging with your stakeholder teams and keeping them looped in and on the same page. I should also say, before I got into security, I was a tech PM. So a lot of the things I look at from a dev perspective, I'm probably more nitpicky than most. And I think that's a really great skill to have, being able to get specific requirements out and being able to be technical and hands-on with the team. So again, being able to build with existing and free open source resources. I've done a lot of this in my career, and how you do this is really crowdsourcing info from the online community. It's huge. I'm sure you guys all use it in your day-to-day. I hope if you have the opportunity to use open source technologies and even just looking on Reddit or Slack channels, Discord channels for researching known technologies or use cases to help build out and architect your solutions. And again, being able to know your tools and skill sets, being able to discuss your architecture with SMEs, and knowing that your tool is only as good as its user. Sorry, I'm going to take a quick water break. It is critical to lay good security foundations for a SOC to enable automation in the first place, as well as growing and maturing as a team. To do this, we're going to go back to basics a little bit. I'm sure you all are familiar with this visual. It's the NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.0, and it's a continuous model for businesses to follow to ensure security best practices. And I kind of want to dissect this a little bit and translate into what I'm going to talk on for my talk today, and how certain aspects of this are most relevant to enabling automation for detection and response teams. So mostly, I think the groundwork falls under identity and protect. And I know this is a lot of text here, but I really think these are prerequisites for automating your SOC, being able to take these things into account before you can hit the ground running, and being able to build based on what you have. So that's knowing what's on your network, having identification of critical assets, identities, users on your systems, and by ensuring that your infrastructure, your systems, and data are secure, this will be your strong base for starting your automation capabilities. So I'm breaking the next 3 phases of my talk, or breaking my talk into 3 phases, and the types are identify, detect, and respond based on the NIST security framework. For identify, I'm going to focus on event management. This includes identifying the data that we need from a threat intel perspective and data we are interested in for alerts and detections. The second piece of this is detect, which centers on workflow automation and taking manual tasks and applying deterministic logic to it. And then the third piece is responding, which translates in the form of analyst tools and services and apps that, again, us devs build for them, making analysts' lives easier and improving their efficiency in day-to-day triage and investigation. Obviously, this is not all-encompassing. I'm not trying to box these into one solely being identify or detect. There's definitely some areas where there's elements of identify and detect in event enrichment, which I'll talk on in the next couple slides. So the first phase, event enrichment. So you might wonder why this is the first step of automation. This creates the foundation for what events we care about, what information we need to be the sense-making layer of data that we have, and then identify the gaps, what data that we need in order to be able to correlate these events. Ultimately, we want to identify events to alert on, as well as anomalous activity. And I've broken down the difference in alerts. Obviously, that goes into finding malicious activity. Anomalies are really finding unusual and interesting bits of information in your network. And I know this slide is perhaps an oversimplification of detection engineering, and I don't have this whole talk to talk on detection engineering, but this is what it would look like from a tactical perspective at a high level. The first bit being collect and contextualize the data. The second piece being normalize the data and ingest it, going through the data manipulation ingestion layer. Third, normalizing the data, identifying tactical patterns from intelligence feeds. And then from there, being able to create those high fidelity alerts based on having concrete, meaningful information that you have from intelligence. And then, of course, getting feedback from your teams and fine-tuning as needed. If it's noisy or false positives, being able to accommodate that. And then, obviously, deploying those capabilities that you have. And I don't have a step 7 on here, but obviously, this is an iterative, cyclical process that you have to go through for building out detections. And I think this is really automation at its core in being able to build this for both your SOC and detection engineering team. And what events and log sources do we care about? There are so many, and this is just like a high level of some of the many logs that we care about for providing context to events, whether it's proxy, auth security, DNS server logs, OS-specific logs. Again, could go down a whole rabbit hole for this, but I really just kind of wanted to share this just to kind of throw it that it's there, and feel free to reference beyond this presentation. The context of these logs really translate to IOCs, which can then be leveraged for developing detections themselves. And of course, we know the pyramid of pain when it comes to threat intelligence and identifying IOCs. If you're not familiar, this pyramid here really has all of the indicators of compromise that we're interested in and how increasingly difficult it gets as you work up the pyramid. So next slide, I'm going to share on different examples of IOCs and how we can connect them to create meaningful alerts and detections. And I know this is a lot of text, but I ultimately want to share how we can pivot from these IOCs of interest to tactical threat intelligence, which can be used for event enrichment. We do so by linking together pieces of data, whether it's IPs, hosts, file hashes, network artifacts. And the example that I have kind of throughout this table is specific to APT27's sysupdate backdoor. And this is known as an attack technique by that threat actor group on Windows and Linux to create and modify an existing system process, which has to do with persistence and privilege escalation. And really, I've outlined through here the different examples of these are the indicators of compromise. These are the examples. So for instance, the TTPs map to the MITRE attack framework. The host activity, say you're looking out for a C2 server, you can find that based on network traffic. And then from there, you can resolve its IP from DNS server logs, among other network monitoring. If you have proxy, firewall information, also great. And being able to check the system, the services, and activity for what you're looking for, as I've mentioned, under host artifacts. And really being able to have this is crucial in being able to build from having all this information, distilling it down, and being able to build detections and alerts from the information that you have. And again, contextualizing IOCs is very much a filtering process, like a funnel, and finding meaningful pieces of information for event enrichment and building detections. There are two main things that we need in order to enable meaningful event enrichment in this case. As I just said, first, being able to have reduce the signal-to-noise ratio for the data that we have, distilling important key pieces of information like file hashes, hosts, IPs, et cetera. And the second piece of it is having data pipelines to ingest, manipulate, and send this data somewhere accessible to analysts and detection engineers. And that's somewhere accessible, like just insert your SIM of choice here, because again, this is SIM agnostic, all like open source ways of handling this thus far. And even kind of taking this a step further, and I know I could devolve a whole bunch more on detection engineering, but I won't for the sake of this presentation, that you could go down the rabbit hole of open source detection engineering with Sigma rules when you go the open source route, and having that full range and autonomy for enriching events, and subsequently building detections on the top of that. If you're not familiar, Sigma is an open source detections as code solution, mapping to various log sources that you have, and pattern matching based on known or deterministic behaviors, such as in this case, I've highlighted that you're searching for a certain file name pattern or a certain file extension, like the .dll file. And then, as I reiterated, and from my past of doing plenty of data and platform engineering work, I cannot stress the importance of your data pipelines. And I personally think, happy to discuss after as well, a lot of the pain points that I've found around all things SIM, SOAR, automation related really stem from the data itself in a very fundamental way, usually. Is it accessible? Is it expensive? Can you run tasks against it easily? Is it performant? Can you query data by various parameters, whether it's querying over, say, like a look-back window, a threshold, or frequency analysis? These are all important things to look out for. And again, having consistent data standards across your pipelines, among other common considerations that I've mentioned here. Again, more nerding out on data engineering things that I've done. And they are time-consuming tasks, but I think when done well, it really sets you up well for enabling automation. And then lastly, if you want to build your own data orchestration layer, which I've done again in the past, these are some of the tools I've used and found helpful and are also open source. Prefect, which I personally really liked. It's really easy to set up, has a very clean UI, and it's Python friendly. Airflow as well can be established, or it's an established solution that's been around a while, so it has a lot of existing support and integrations, which is great, both Python friendly. I've put up both of these in Docker and cloud environments too, so if that's important, also a plus. And for NiFi, it's a GUI-based design, which is a bit interesting, just kind of getting used to, but it does support real-time data processing. And there's a lot you can really do with that, which is cool, just knowing how to do it properly. And again, whether you use these or so many of the other data orchestration tools that are out there, you can, it goes back to that dilemma of being good, cheap, and fast. Pick whatever is needed by your team at this time and for the foreseeable future. And once you have that set up, you can send it to, again, insert your SIEM of choice. Because as long as I think you have the data, that's the root of where you're sending things to, where you're building on top of. And if you have a sound foundation for that, it can work out very well. And again, in my experience, like, you could use from an open source perspective, you could go down the Elk route, Redis, if you're in AWS, DynamoDB for data storage. But again, I digress. There are so many different solutions out there. And that's just breaking the iceberg. So the key takeaways for event log source and data ingestion orchestration is, first of all, identifying your cyber threat intel feeds and being able to curate indicators of compromise based on that. Secondly, identifying log sources of interest for enrichment. And then third, contextualizing these events and develop relevant detections from there. And lastly, implementing data pipelines for automated processing. And we're going to go to phase 2 on workflow automation. OK, I'm going to make this a little interactive for you guys. Can you please raise your hand if you currently use Slack in your workspace? OK, cool. Of the folks who raised their hand, can you raise your hand if you use Slack workflows in your workspace? Yeah, nice. OK, well, lots of opportunity to use that, as well as there are plenty of other integrations for whatever other chat platforms you use. I know for Microsoft Teams, anyone use Teams? Yeah? OK, cool. All the Google folks. And we have that you could do as well. But obviously, these are just kind of the communication layer and then building automation workflows from there. So I'm going to give a couple examples of what we've done at Huntress, leveraging Slack, where you can create workflows, apps, shortcuts, and commands. And from basically the groundwork that we've laid in the first phase, from taking elements from event enrichment and existing data pipelines, we can build upon those for higher level asks, again, coming to workflow automation. And yeah, I'm going to go through some of these examples in the following slides. So for Slack Workflow Builder, if you're not familiar, it's built into Slack, and it has out-of-the-box new templates that you can use that are basically just automated workflows for various activities. And they are truly no-code solutions. Like, you can just spin it up if you have, I think you might need a particular role-based access to be able to do this, but there's no backend required. It's easy to set up, easy to configure, and you can create Slack-based artifacts from there, whether it's channels, messages, or forms. And again, I say it's new and improved because the out-of-the-box capabilities that I'm going to talk on in the coming slides are pretty cool and really useful for how we use them. And they just recently updated their UI as well. And in particular, I want to take a moment to highlight some of their new out-of-the-box workflows that they have available for, again, anyone that has Slack on their workspace. You could set these up. Again, you might just need the right permissions for them. But some of the examples that we use in our day-to-day at Huntress are the send scheduled message. This is great for daily stand-up threads. There's also collecting information and feedback, which again, from like the dev side of things, getting feedback from our SOCs, our detection engineering team, asking them, how can we improve this app? What would you like to see as a new feature? And opening that line of communication with them. And then the third piece being incident response automated workflow, which is really cool because we can kickstart security incident communications with that just from spinning it up. And we use this in particular. I'd say of those three, this is probably the most impactful. And when we started using it, everyone was so excited because it saves us time, and people know where to find information quickly, which is critical for incidents and when it matters. So we have rapid responses that are cross-functional collaborations for incidents, 0 days, any sort of war room-esque events. And what this does automatically is spins up a Slack channel for just being specific to that incident at hand, creating the threads that we need for relevant activities and updates, and then looping in the necessary stakeholders. And I think this is something that's really important for automatically engaging folks right away. And again, if you wanted to build on top of this, you could leverage integrations in Slack, such as for PagerDuty, to directly notify your analyst if that's something you use. There's another example I'm going to share in the next slide that you could do some more open-ended custom form submissions. So this is an example workflow that you could build out for creating and submitting incident reports. And the first screenshot here shows the high-level flow, where the user clicks on the shortcut, which is usually in the message bar. There's the 3 dots. You click on the 3 dots, and it'll be available there as a shortcut. And the user completes a form. Then it sends to a channel for the SOC to review. And then it sends that information that's been submitted in the form. And then 2 is what the form would look like to a user or SOC analyst or anyone who's submitting the reported event itself, and the time window associated with it, summary if you wanted to include the type or severity, And 3 is how it would show in a channel after the form submission. So I've talked a bunch on Slack workflows. This is a bit different for building your own Slack apps. I like to think of this as the DIY option for if you want a little bit more functionality and customization, then Slack apps are definitely the way to go. You can build something like this with Flask or leverage their Bolt SDK, which is Slack's very own framework, and it exists. It's in JavaScript, Java, and Python. The examples I've used and we'll talk about in the following slides are all Python-based. And you can use these for integrating and leveraging with Slack's web API, which is pretty cool and very robust. There's definitely a learning curve to it, I will say, but it's highly customizable and easy to use. And there's maybe a few nuanced limitations and stuff, but it's for what it can do is really powerful and seamless for our team. This is one of the first Slack apps I developed at Huntress, and it is the detect requester form. It serves as a Slack app where we get input from the SOC analysts, whether it's new detections or perhaps we want to tweak a detection because it's really noisy, false positives, or again, if there's an incident and we want to be able to build new detections to catch in the future, like a never before seen. And then being able to send this systematically to our issue tracker. So filling in this form about the detection that we're requesting, the description, what we want changed, and this will automatically generate a ticket in our detection engineering board automatically, so they don't have to go and create a ticket because they don't like creating tickets. Or who, yeah. And then being able to do that, we can build a service to call our system, like I said, and generate that ticket. And it keeps everyone happy, like being able to have tickets created automatically and have updated detections from there. So great way to keep everyone happy there. And then key takeaways, taking a step back to workflow automation. Identify the routine tasks of things done by the SOC. That would be your baseline. And second, brainstorm and evaluate how to optimize with an automated workflow. And then from there, developing your solution, having a dev plan, and then from there, demoing to the team you're building for, like detection engineering or SOC, and ideally share documentation on that, and then iterate, maintain, fine-tune as needed. And phase 3, the last phase I want to talk on to do with response for analyst tools and services. I want to share some of the tools and services that I've built for analysts to make their lives easier. One of the recent ones that I've gotten the chance to work on is we have a queue monitoring Slack app that alerts on critical and high signals. And I say signals, but synonymous with events that are coming in for our queue for analysts to triage. And how do we do this? We pull in the latest events based on a previously run task that then pulls in all of these and serializes them, and then being able to filter by severity and the specified query logic, like whether that's deduping, looking back on a certain look back window, and then looking for those desirable pieces of information, and then translating that over to Markdown to generate the Slack message, and then actually posting the message to a channel. Oh, and apologies, because some of it's redacted from the previous slide. I've also built another example here, the Shift Handover Summary Slack app, which is for our SOC, and it compiles an overall list of critical events, signals seen by an organization. And this helps ensure communication and cohesion between global SOC teams when they're having their shift handovers, just to make sure there's no gaps or anything missing. Ideally, this could be great for tracking trends and patterns over a longer term. That's something we're not doing yet, but potentially could. And look out for anomalies for a given organization, or maybe some repeated patterns to look out for. So that's pretty cool. This is an example screenshot of what it would look like. Orgs are made up for demo purposes, of course. It's not real. And yeah. And then another example of a Slack app that we've built for analysts is application monitoring Slack app for our SOC, which again is a bit self-explanatory, but it will alert them if any of our services that we've built for them are down. This is usually not a big deal because they'll be green, but if we're putting in any bug fixes or might be testing something out, they can easily be aware and have transparency on it. On the dev and data engineering side of things, we also need to ensure data reliability and accessibility. So that's why I've included this on data store monitoring, obviously making sure if data is populating as expected, we're getting the data that we need, and of course the data that detection engineers, and if our SOC analysts are querying data themselves, they need to be able to keep these things in mind and have good quality and integrity with their data. And ultimate goals that we have when it comes to building analyst tools and services, we want to make their lives easier, and we do so by reducing their investigation time, or if we have SLO times to meet, reducing costs, while still maintaining our operational efficiencies, and lastly, continuously improving and iterating as needed on our solutions. And for key takeaways, I think we need to understand the SOC for day-to-day tasks and responsibilities. I think being able to understand, empathize, I know they're always very busy and things are on fire, but truly being able to understand what they're working on and their thought process and why and how they do the things and why and how their systems work the way they do is critical for really understanding and building meaningful solutions for them. And again, determining what you want to improve, what's the task at hand, being able to create a dev plan, brainstorm for it, and if you need to architect your solution with SMEs in your team, of course, loop them in, and then build it out and demo with the team. Make sure they're happy, get good feedback, and again, ideally share your docs and iterate from there. And throughout all of this, there is a common theme that I just want to highlight that I think is so important, and that would be communication with whether it's your SOC, with your leadership, with your dev team, or any other stakeholders that you're working with for collaboration. Oftentimes, these problems that we're solving and developing solutions for are non-trivial and often highly technical solutions. So this isn't something we can just toss into a large language model and call it a day, at least not yet. So as long as we are human and strive for that 100% perfection, we won't be replaced just yet. And so overall, I leave this as advice, if I haven't iterated it enough in my talk today, is maintaining a feedback loop with your SOC. What works, what doesn't, being open and transparent to their feedback. And I think that's something that we strive to do and do in our day-to-day. And additionally, collaborating with additional team members, stakeholders for integrated solutions, and seek out that expertise. Don't just go with something because it's the easy thing or you need to throw something over the fence right away. Although sometimes that is the case, but still seek expertise. And understanding the why and be specific with technical requirements. I think once you are able to do this, again, it's that iterative, cyclical, DevOps-like process of working with and being in stride with your SOC team. And ideally, again, asymptotically approaching what your team values when it comes to having good, fast, and cheap solutions. Lastly, a few limitations and additional things to consider. I heard this in some of the earlier talks on this track, but can't iterate it enough even from my own experience on the dev side of things, is getting buy-in from your leadership and stakeholders. I think for long-term value adds, time saved, cost reduced, I work with a ton of really bright engineers and devs that can build out a solution, but if you can't give the why for why it's important and that doesn't convey over to leadership, it's not going to get off the ground. So I think that's the first thing that stands out to me, just to be vocal on that and get your point across. The second thing to consider too, I know I've talked on a lot of open source technologies, and that's probably what I would lean towards in general, but something to consider is building in-house versus buying, and it depends. You can build really great solutions with off-the-shelf tools, but it kind of functions as a double-edged sword. You're only as good as the tools that they're configured and built out to be. And sometimes it could require some upskilling, fine-tuning, and know how to use those tools effectively. And then lastly, I kind of alluded on this earlier, but lacking the permissions to build foundational automations. So I know I talked a bunch on Slack apps and workflows, but I think there's a certain role-based permission that you need in order to deploy apps and workflows to a workspace. So if that's something you're taking away from this conversation, definitely engage with the teams that are responsible for dealing with those role-based permissions. And again, just being able to collaborate with them, being transparent. Are there systematic controls in place for programmatic access, like APIs that you could easily leverage through like a Python script or something? That would be really great. And lastly, I want to say these are all great things to consider, but I hope from sharing from some of my own experiences on the blue teaming side of things, dev and engineer side of things, data engineering, I hope some of this finds useful for you guys. And yeah, that's all I have. So I just wanted to say thank you for coming to listen to my talk today. Thank you for my team and Huntress for supporting me through this. And thank you to my teammates, friends, and mentors. Thanks. Any questions?
Any questions from the crowd? Okay.
Hey, thanks. Great talk. I have a question about staffing. So assuming you're in a smaller company and you can't really have a full-time SOC and a full-time detection engineering team, is it possible to use the same personnel to build out the detection rules and also do incident response? And if so, what kind of skill sets would you look for?
Yeah, I've been in that position when I was at Twitter. And I think when you're on a really lean starting out team, I think, and again, having the ability to like maybe buy off-the-shelf solutions to automate and augment some of your processes, there's solutions out there for, I think this comes up a lot for, should SOC analysts be developers? Should they be the ones writing the detections and scripting tools and whatnot? And I've been in teams where they were like, in practice, yes, but in actuality, no. And there are tools that exist for this. One of the ones that's coming to mind for me in particular is Tines, which is basically a SOAR tool. Again, no, I know it's separate from my talk, but solutions such as Tines that lend themselves to really just making calls, getting requests from different API points, and really connecting those dots from where you have those data stores, APIs that you're pulling information from. That's what holds a lot of the glue together. So I know solutions like that are helpful, that kind of abstract away and are more no-code solutions. Again, stuff like Slack workflows are great because that's like limited coding if your SOC or detection engineers don't do coding. I'd say for the dev side of things, or sorry, detection engineering side of thing, for like a SOC analyst, again, I think abstracting away, having a SIM, having kind of standards and run books to say, hey, if you see these kind of detections, this is kind of how you would set it up, like almost have like a template for it, and then have that baseline, and then be able to build up. And if you can automate that, fantastic. Does that answer your question? Any other questions?
Great presentation, thank you. So over your presentation, I kind of thought one of the issues that organizations that maybe are immature in their automation is the workflow process analysis. So in your experience, are you equating the creation and the use of runbooks as that starting point by which your SOC team has those processes documented so then you could build automation on top of? Because otherwise, I guess my follow-up question to that is, how critical is having that workflow process understanding in place?
Yeah, that's a good question. It depends. I would say some things we have in place manually, and then we get asks from our SOC leadership, and they say things like, oh, this would be great like if we could automate this. And then that's obviously seen as a huge value add because that saves all the time spent that analysts would do on triage and investigation. We've also had like some asks where we just get told from, or if you get like feedback from leadership that something would be helpful to have, and it's like, why aren't we doing this today? Again, I'm in a smaller team now. Some of the other places I've been on, smaller teams. So kind of being able to be lean and getting 80% of the work done in 20% of the time type solutions, I think sometimes it lends to that, but it's such like a value add in the time that we're saving that even if we don't have a base, building from there, but then that becomes part of the standard baked in. So it depends.
Any thoughts on integrating workflows into things like MS Teams, where if you're in a really shit hits the fan scenario, maybe the adversary is looking over your shoulder in your Microsoft solutions, for instance. So having your incident flows in Teams or maybe Slack, I'm not so sure how that works in Slack, but any reflections on that? It's not really an automation question. I know it's more like where do you actually do your work and considerations on possible attackers looking over your shoulder.
Are you talking about, or are you asking about the data being secure that's in Slack or Teams that's being sent?
Yeah, secure. So as in, if I create an incident and I have all my streams in Slack or in Teams, and if my admin creds to the whole kingdom is gone, then they can maybe follow along with what's going on in the incident.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And that's something that we've gotten thoughts on internally. And what we've done to address that is anything that we've built, like for some of the Slack apps, we've had to build like a backend service for reaching out to other API endpoints. We've added SSL certs to them so we know that it's encrypted. And for referencing the Slack web API and Bolt framework, you can add your own auth to it. So we have that so that it's encrypted. And yeah, but I guess if you think of it as like the larger question of like, oh, if Slack got hacked and stuff, then it's a bigger question. But that's what we do personally.
We have the same sort of problem with Jira as well. Jira ticketing, to do case management.
Yeah.
And red teams came in and through some unrelated person or account, and permissive settings within Jira, they were able to see everything that we were doing with our case management. So,
were you sending that into Slack or just in Jira? They got access.
So we just broke off, and it's a different tool, different authentication, different everything. But this is a piece that we don't want them spying on us.
Yeah, no, that is a really interesting, larger question that like goes beyond this conversation, but I think is really fascinating and more food for thought for how we could build this. But again, like I said, just building with what we have.
Just one quick thought is
Yeah.
you could set up a separate Slack org and just have a limited number of participants, so you can still use all the Slack automations, but it's segmented from your enterprise access, perhaps.
Yeah, it's a good thought too.
Specifically looking at the at Teams,
Mm-hmm.
looked at what Wiz dropped, what was it, yesterday, about Microsoft's AI session where they discovered 80,000 leaked Microsoft Teams messages from
Oof.
Microsoft.
Big oof. I did not see that, but I'll check it out.
Yeah.
Any other questions or anything? I know we have like a minute, or if y'all want to get a jump start for lunch, all good. Thanks. Have a good one.